Well, as you know, we do describe ourselves as the patient-centered clinical decision support learning network, and we've talked a lot about the various aspects of decision support today, but we haven't really dwelled upon the patient-centered aspect. So we're going to move to that now, and I know I have to do a good job because I've got Casey, who's sitting on one side, and I've got Danny sitting on the other, and I feel like they're purposely arrayed themselves at the two sides of the room so that... I'm right here for a few minutes because I got to capture a couple. There we go. Anyway, let me introduce Danny Van Leeuwen, who is a very, very valued participant in the Learning Network. He also sits on our steering committee. Danny is an action catalyst empowering people traveling together towards best health. He is a writer, he speaks, and advising on learning what works for people in their health journey. Informed decision-making, patient-centered research, communications at transitions of care, and technology supporting solutions created by and for people. Danny also goes by the name of Health Hats, and you notice he is wearing a hat. He wears many hats in healthcare: patient with multiple sclerosis, care partner for several family members, end-of-life journeys. He's been a nurse for 40 years, as an informaticist, as a QI leader, a mentor to leaders and advocates, and as a patient/caregiver activist. He also has a weekly blog, and you can visit his weekly blog at www.healthhats.com, and there's a dash between health and hats. So Danny, I'm very pleased that you're here today to join us. And do you can control your slides there? And without further ado, Danny Van Leeuwen.
So this is one patient's point of view. So I'm the CEO of my health team. I have many subcontractors, and I manage them. I have secondary progressive multiple sclerosis. I self-identify as a patient-caregiver activist, and my expertise includes lived experience as a person with a progressive chronic illness. And I've been a care partner for my grandmother, my mother, and a son's end-of-life journeys. I'm a registered nurse, as you already heard. I've led the implementation of an EHR in a managed care company and a urban health system. And I've been director or VP of quality management or outcomes management across the continuum of care. So my specialty really is the space where real-life research and technology overlap. So as a person with a progressive chronic illness, my goal is to live at peak performance. And peak performance for everybody, but especially somebody with a progressive illness, is a moving target. So what my experience is that this goal I have of living at peak performance has very little to do with medical care. It has some to do with medical care, but little. Now, this is hard for you to read, and I appreciate that. I just want to say that on my website, and you'll see at the end, or if you just go to my website, you'll see under conferences, this conference, and there is a page dedicated where everything I present plus other resources can be found. Okay? So, but what's important here is that living with a chronic illness is complicated. And this is like one of the best diagrams I've actually ever seen. It was created by Kristen Lind, and she's the mother of G, see the G in the middle? I think you can see that. That's Gabe, and he's on the autism spectrum, and he's the patient, and then around there is the family, and then there's all the issues she has to deal with school. What she created this for is that she found it really difficult to communicate with her primary care physician, or his primary care physician, all that she had to deal with. Like, he thought, or she thought, whoever the primary care physician was, that it was about medicine. And she was trying to explain to them that it isn't just about medicine. And so all those things around school had to do with school, legal, financial, support systems, recreation and community, advocacy and leadership. And then over here are the health-related things. So it's a small proportion. Now, you are, clinicians and academics and technologists, and you probably think more in terms of determinants of health. And the medical proportion of determinants of health are really pretty small, 11%. So I think it's important that we just get a grip and realize that the medical part of this, making decisions, is like not the big deal to people. Now, when we think about decision making, so my goal is to live at peak performance. And so let me just give you a sense of the decisions I've had to make over the last month, just the last month. Am I safe to drive at night? Can I afford the rate increase of my massage therapist? I make heavy use of massage therapy, chiropractic, acupuncture, and I go weekly, biweekly, monthly. They're expensive. So can I keep affording this stuff? I have trouble sleeping, and I have trouble sleeping because I have a neurogenic pain, and I have cramping, so how much should I experiment with cannabis? The biggest risk that my clinical team all agrees on is my biggest risk is falling. And it's not, they say, you're not going to die of MS. You're going to die of, whatever white men die of, or falling. And so then the decisions I have to make is, when should I walk, because I need to walk to maintain peak performance? When should I use my electric wheelchair? And I made the decision that I'm going to operate with 2 canes instead of 1 cane because it's safer. I'm losing weight, and so I have a decision to make. Should I eat that cookie my wife made? That's a really important decision. We're going to travel to Spain. My wife is a hiker. She hikes the Grand Canyon. She hikes like serious hikes, and she leaves me behind because I can't do it. Well, I'll be damned. She is not going to Spain by herself, so I'm going to go to Spain with her. So can I really do that? That's a big decision. I'm 66. I'm on Medicare. I take a medication that makes a significant difference in my ability to be mobile. And when I was on my wife's insurance, it cost me $75 a month, but on Medicare, it cost me $475 a month. I can't afford that. What am I going to do? Okay. So we in the clinical decision support industrial complex like to think about shared decision making. And I think about, okay, what's that? Am I sharing the decision with my clinician? Am I sharing it with my care partner, who's my wife? Or is it the clinician that's sharing it with me? There's a power dynamic. What is that power dynamic in shared decision making? Some people call it informed decision making, which seems to me a little more, power equal. That we have differing expertises, and we're going to share in the decisions to make. But I have to say that I have actually never talked to a patient that has that doesn't have a clinical background that thinks about either of those. A clinical decision support, clinical decision, they don't think like that. We think about making choices. that there's choices I have to make about my health. And I either make them intentionally, or they're made for me, or I don't even think about them, I just make them, but they're decisions, and they're choices that we make. So it's how we think about this is really important. Now, some decisions are one-time decisions, right? So should I have that surgery? Should I have that screening? Well, that's not probably a good one. That's more of a cyclical decision, right? So, am I going to have the screening test? Am I going to have immunization? Am I going to go to some kind of therapy? Those are cyclical decisions. And then there's like the never-ending decisions. And taking a medicine is a never-ending decision. Every single time, that's a decision. Am I going to take it or am I not going to take it? And lifestyle choices. What about diet? What about activity? What about spiritual factors? What about my mental health? These are like never-ending decisions. So when we think about decisions, there's no like homogeneous decision. There's so many different ones. So, I'm health hats, and so you can see, I've been a clinician, a direct care clinician as a nurse. I've been a boss. I've been a patient. I've been a caregiver. And here's the things that I've learned. Decisions take time. They take time. I mean, just think about putting in a kitchen. You're making like a ton of decisions when you're putting in your kitchen, and they take time. What are the knobs? What are the appliances? What kind of counter are you going to do? There's like, decisions take time, and it's the same for healthcare stuff. Decisions take time. They're not made instantly. Most decisions actually don't occur when the clinician and the patient are together. Most decisions actually occur outside of that. They occur, their pillow talk. They are Thanksgiving dinner. They are the barber shop or the beauty parlor. So decisions they happen elsewhere. And so much of the conversation today is about decisions that happen when the patient and the clinician are together. The decision is not the end point. That's some of the times I think when I, talk with people is like, it's all about getting to a decision. But the decision is just the first step. Then you got to do it. And then so I think that our thinking about decisions as an endpoint is like, it's just like this little part of it, whereas what comes after is like that. I think that we've talked about trust. But what I heard in the trusting conversation is a lot about people in the clinical decision support industrial complex who are talking about trust amongst themselves. Well, don't forget about the trust between the patient and the clinician. Balance of power. Decisions, there's power dynamics are part of decisions. All of what we're talking about is technology. And I don't know. I mean, to me, technology is grease or sandpaper. Sometimes it helps and sometimes it doesn't. And it's not any kind of panacea. So if now we're going to think about making decisions, making choices, we need information to make choices, right? So what you have here is really my mother was 89 years old. Her name was not Alice, it was Ruth. She did live in a different state. She didn't have diabetes. So I created sort of amalgam. My mother really died of pancreatic cancer. She had an intentional death. She stopped eating and drinking. I was her care partner. I did care about who was on her care team, including me and her. I did care about the schedule of what was going to happen, who was going to do what, when were they going to do it, did it actually happen, what did it take to actually accomplish whatever it is we decided that needed to be done. So the decision, it's the after the decision. I need to know what my mom wanted for herself. She wanted to die. Okay. I had to deal with that. She didn't want to have pain. Morphine, she had a paradoxical reaction to morphine. It made her hurt more. Okay, so it was different. We had to figure that out. We had to know if the actions had the effects we intended them to. We needed to know what the risks to her were and what could we do to prevent them or deal with them if they came up. We need to keep track of everything. We need to keep it current. We need to share it. We needed answers to our questions when we had the question, not when we went to the doctor. So here's a summary of what was in that narrative. Okay, these are the things that, information that we needed. But, the data related to almost all of this information we need is not in the EHR and not in a claims file. So this is sort of this, looking for the keys under the light, that story? And so we're looking there because that's where the light is, but I lost my keys over there in the dark. So to me, it feels like what we're doing is, if this is the information that individuals need to make decisions in their health, about their health, and you can't find that information in the EHR or the claims data, and that's the work we're doing, I don't know. Anyway, so let's just say we have an ideal world. And in the ideal world, we have all the patient-centered data that we need, and we have all the evidence that we need. Well, it's going to be like drinking dirty water from a fire hose. It's going to be so much that we're not going to be able to figure out what to do with it. And when I say we, I mean the patient and the direct care clinician and the people that support them, people at the center of care. There's just too much. Assuming they have what they need, which you totally cannot assume, it's going to be too much. So, as Jerry has said, there's the 5 rights. So you know what these are. I don't need to go into this. You know what these 5 rights are. Okay. So let's just think. Like, I am not the typical patient, right? I mean, patients are not informaticists and a clinician and patients I'm unusual. Okay, it's not just because I have a bow tie and a hat. I'm unusual, and so there's variation in engagement. And we like to talk about patient engagement, what I think is a little bit misplaced. I think we have to talk about patient engagement, but we also have to talk about clinician engagement. And you can see that there's, the more engaged, I'm on one extreme, I'm the CEO of my health team, and then there's, people, just give me the damn pill. I don't want pain, give me the pill. And so there's a range. And the same with clinicians. There's, I have clinicians. I'm lucky. I live in Boston. I can, shop for clinicians. And I can find clinicians that are really engaged. But not everybody can. And there are burned out clinicians. And so when you start to think about all of those relationships, that clinical decision support needs to work for all those different relationships because they vary. And what works for me as this really engaged, empowered person isn't going to work for somebody who's just give me the damn pill. Okay. Now, so I'm an opinionated guy. I'm one person. I'm one patient. And so, I'm involved in this initiative, and so I need to reach out to other people and ask them what they think. And so I am connected, through social media and personal relationships with a lot of people who are fairly engaged with their health care. So again, my sample is not generalizable. But the kinds of things that when I go, and so let me just give you a sample of where I go to get information from colleagues and other patients is Twitter, LinkedIn, chronic illness blogger, PCORI ambassadors, SMART patients, those are patients with MS, Coalition of Compassionate Care of California, We Go Health Leaders, the Society of Participatory Medicine, the Society of Misdiagnosis in Medicine. Okay, so I have reached out to these groups to talk to them about clinical decision support and pain management. So what have I learned from them? Well, I've learned from them, again, not a sample, not a generalizable sample, but from engaged people. They have what they think is their ideal world, their best case. They imagine you have all the information you need, decisions about your medical health, and includes the cost of it. Where have we been talking about how much this crap costs? Nowhere. And that's the single biggest thing people want to know. How much is it going to cost? There's just no doubt in my mind. It comes up over and over and over again. Where are we in that conversation? They imagine you can talk about your life goals and challenges and that your doctor can hear you. I was pretty lucky. I had a physician who said, a neurologist, when he told me I had MS, and he said, I know a lot about drugs and therapeutics for MS, and I don't know crap about you. And my goal is to get to know you. And then we together are going to figure out what works for you. I had to go back and talk to him about what was important to me. And what was important to me is I wanted to live the best life possible. I didn't want to mess with my pathological optimism. I wanted to hang out with my grandkids, and I wanted to play my baritone saxophone. And he says, we can live with that. We can work with that. And that's the basis of how we make decisions against that. Okay, so you need to have time to do that. That just can't not be done in 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 8 minutes, whatever. You can't do it. The doctor trusts you to be the expert about yourself. That's what people say. I am really lucky. I have a care partner that cares and is knowledgeable and is aggressive. Everybody doesn't have that. And that we can access medical advice when we need it, which, Lord help me. And finally, and to me, this is my pet one. And that is that if you try something that you know pretty soon that it's not working and you try something else. And so where is that in our clinical decision support? Okay, so then we're talking about, I talked with my networks of people about what their advice was about pain management. And I send them stuff from this initiative and said, this is about clinical decision support, blah, 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 related to opioid use. And mostly the response I first got was, I have no idea what you're talking about. And the second response, they said, well, if you're talking about pain, we know pain. And so what did they say? They wanted to be able to talk about goals of pain, including financial and emotional goals. This is a really big one. I told you that I was care partner to a son that I had on his end-of-life journey, and his name was Mike. He died when he was 26 of metastatic melanoma. And he had metastasis to his brain, and he had brain surgery, and he had metastasis to his lung, and he had lung surgery. So after the lung surgery, I'm in the room with him, and he's curled up in bed in a fetal position. He's got the morphine pump, and he's not pushing it. And the nurse comes in and says, what pain level are you at? And, he's writhing. And he says 6. And I go, Mike, what are you talking about? You can't uncurl. You're in so much pain you can't. He said, well, I could be in more. And I have actually not spoken to a patient who likes the pain scale, and very few clinicians who like the pain scale, because 0 to 10 is represents very little. It's not a series of snapshots, a pain. And pain changes, and there's different circumstances, and what works now does not necessarily work later. And so it's just a poor measure. I grew up in my nursing career with the new vital sign of pain. And it's just, I don't know, it's malarkey. So I'm not opinionated. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a couple other things people said. Use palliative care, compensate providers for the time they spent with us. People in pain, it's so hard to make generalizations. A lot of people who are in pain don't think about the drug first. They're thinking about other things that they can do. Well, do we know what the resources are in our communities that are alternative ways of managing pain? As I said, I use massage, chiropractic, acupuncture. I don't want to take gabapentin. I don't want to take the drugs the neurologist suggests I take. I think more about non-medication solutions. I mean, ARC has put out some really interesting stuff. Non-invasive, non-pharmacological treatment choices for chronic pain, a systematic review. You can find that either on their website or mine. I have a colleague that I work with whose name is Amy Baxter, and she's a pediatric anesthesiologist who's really interested in pain. And we were talking on the phone the other day, like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. You probably know she went to some national conference on pain, and she said there were 127 lectures, 72 of them were about drugs, 50 of those were about complications with drugs, 8 were about office electrical stimulation and laser treatment, none were dedicated to vitamins, physical therapy, exercise, or diet, and 2 were about drug-free solutions for patients to try at home. Like, something's wrong. So I think that, people suggested things like, why don't insurance companies give patients money to spend on non-pharmacological solutions rather than taking opioids? Like, pay for it, for crying out loud. It's their money. Their money, meaning the patient's money. Anyway, whatever. That's a whole political discussion. Give a list of evidence-based non-pharm options to every pre-op patients. Refer patients to integrated behavioral health support. This is a pretty important one to me. I'm into, so maybe this is more than you want to know, but I have this thing that happens to me when I pee. And what happens is I get this electric thing out my arms and my legs. And when it started happening, it freaked me out. I went to the doctor and I wanted something to take. But, getting some therapy, I got to understand, I love myself. This is something that's happening to myself. It lasts between 20 and 80 seconds, and I can live with it. And I just know, oh, there it is. Oh, my God, that is so weird. But it'll end. So there is, there's the mind-body connection. Okay. Anyway, a couple more things. Here, this last one. Managing pain is a continual experiment. When you figure you need a bunch of stuff in your toolbox to manage pain, and absolutely nothing works every time. It just isn't that way in real life. So you need a lot of different things, at least 2, if not 3, if not 10, of things to try when you're in pain. Okay. So this is a diagram you can find on my website. This is from the person I told you about, Amy Baxter, and she did different, these are different pain management solutions and some strengths and weaknesses of it. But just have to remember, some people want a silver bullet, some people want drug-free solutions, and where is the evidence? And one of the things that I find interesting about our research, I work with P. Corey a lot, by the way. And I review funding applications. I co-chair the communication and dissemination. But the thing that's really interesting to me is that evidence is a lot looking in the rearview mirror. Evidence is not about really what are people trying and what is working for some people and what can we learn about that, and then that information gets added into our knowledge. Okay, so let me bring some of this stuff together. So if we think about what clinicians think about, right? Clinicians think about curing, treating, and preventing stuff. The tools they have are drugs, procedures, and therapy. They hopefully use research-based evidence, which is not guaranteed at all, but supposedly that's what they use. And they make clinical decisions based on two of the determinants of health: medicine, and genetics and biology. Now, patients, on the other hand, have expertise about themselves. They care about their life goals. They think if you're well, you want to stay well. If you have an acute problem, you want to get over it. If you have a chronic illness like me, or you are dying, you want to live the best life possible. And we think about function, milestones, safety, relationships, spiritual life, and we make choices, and we think about other determinants of health: behavior, circumstances, and the environment. Now, where do these come together? They come together in everybody cares about the team. Everybody's making choices. People have plans. They're trying to execute those plans. They're trying to share that. They're trying to learn from it, and they're trying to adjust. So this is an area where they come together. So, okay, here I am, this really obviously opinionated fellow who cares very much about making choices in our health and working together with my clinician subcontractors. And so what have I learned, and what do I hope that the clinical decision support industry does? I think that we need to step out of the clinical academic technology frame. I feel like we are muscle bound, and that what we need to do is be nimble and be able to dance. And we're not there. We're just into strengthening what we already know. I think that we need to have time to build relationships, and we need to foster trust. Technology is not going to replace this. I think we need to listen for and study non-medical and non-biological solutions that work for somebody. And then let's explore those. And if they are solutions that are less risky, meaning you're not going to get addicted to them, like I am not going to get addicted to massage, do you really need the same standards of scrutiny and rigor in the evidence? So we need to think about that. How can we influence those that allocate our money for the care we receive to pay for non-medical and non-biological solutions? Like, that's the policy advocacy work that the clinical decision support community can do. Everybody at the center of care needs just-in-time information. We need to we need to invite people at the center of care to sit at the tables of governance, design, operations, and learning. So I'm the token patient here, and I represent me. We need more people. We need more direct care clinicians, not part-timers, full-timers, and we need more patients and caregivers at the table when we're making decisions about healthcare delivery, about healthcare research, about technology, about workflow and life flow. I think we need to design for variation. Nobody is like me. We need to design at least for the extremes, if not some more permutations of the variation of engagement that people have, and or culture or values or whatever. And finally, I really think we need to have continual learning. That we think this is an endpoint is really misguided, and it needs to be a continually learning process. Okay, so what I want to wrap up with is, how are we doing? Oh, shoot. I just used all my time. I would be happy to talk to you about, you have all experienced pain. Whether it's your pain or somebody in your family's pain, you've experienced. So what do you need in those roles from you in your professional lives? You need to think about that and get a little more real. And so thank you very much. There's the where you can find more information on my website. Thank you. If you want to take a question, I'm happy to take questions.
Danny's come a long way here to talk, so we'll hold off on lunch if there are questions for just a couple of questions here.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Danny. I'm Jessica Anker. I'm section editor for eGEMS.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. I wanted to offer a concept that I floated in eGEMS blog, which I think it captures some of what you're trying to say here, which is that most of what we've been working on in this room does not count as patient-centered decision support, but it does count as patient-specific in that, trying to better mine the electronic health record, David Bates pointed out the need for better evidence generation about, comorbidities and drug interactions, things like that. That presenting that information to the physician when needed is actually, or pharmacogenomics data, is actually patient-specific, and it's a great step forward, but it doesn't quite get us to the patient-centered point. Yeah. So I think that making the distinction between patient-specific and patient-centered could actually further the discussion of what a lot of us are working on.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank you too. It's actually something for us in our definitions to think about is that distinction.
Craig Umscheid, University of Pennsylvania.
Hi, Craig.
I wanted to get your thoughts on the provider wellness movement. So one of the things that you said toward the end of your talk was around the importance of time and building relationships between providers and patients. And I know a lot of the work that many of us in the room in the clinical decision support sphere think about is making it easier for providers to do the right things for their patients, and in effect making it such that they can spend more time with the patients and less time with the actual EHR. So I want to get your thoughts on, is this more recent focus, I would say, on provider wellness, at least at our institution that's the case, but I think that's a national and perhaps an international phenomena. Is that getting traction in the patient community, and what kind of discussion is happening around that, if it is?
Well, I think that I think of it two ways. One is there's a lot of conversation in the patient-caregiver community about the taking care of yourself as a caregiver. Because there's just such a high burnout rate. It's like clinicians, you just get burned out. And so I think that there is, I hear a lot of conversation about people taking care of themselves so that they can be good helpers, whether they're clinicians or caregivers. When you're sick, when you're in pain, you don't really think about this kind of stuff. You just want help. You know what I mean? So it's really hard to think about other. So anyway.
That's fair.
Okay, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Gantz, Cleveland. I'm a nurse scientist from the University of Colorado. Mm-hmm. And I also want to comment about the time and relationship factor that you mentioned. Much of the work that I have done with decision support incorporates the production of an individualized patient education material that then the clinician can use to have that conversation with the patient that facilitates that relationship. So we incorporate the expert model and the motivational interviewing specific to what that patient has responded to the screening in their in the technology. So I agree with you that technology will never replace the relationship, but we can use what technology can do to help us have a better conversation. So thanks.
I think you're right. That's great. I mean, that's the grease. You know, I was talking about technology can be grease or sandpaper. That's the grease. And yeah, I mean, goodness. I mean, we're obviously enamored with technology. And so it might as well be grease. Yes.
Thank you for your presentation. You referenced a power dynamic in your slides.
Yeah.
And I'm wanting to ask you if you could impart on this group, the industrial complex, who are, I'm here for the first time, but lots of PhDs and MDs and highly, highly accomplished people, what they might do or do differently to allow those patients who probably don't have this level of education, are frightened, and have a very different way of expressing themselves and valuing achievement, to be able to have a voice at the table. What could we do to make them feel welcome and heard?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I do, I mentioned this WeGo Health, you know, was one of the networks that they're also a client of mine. And what they do is they have like a matchmaking platform with patient experts and different industry or, you know, marketing or researchers or whatever. And one of the things that we've been working on is how do you assess the capabilities of people. You know, so people may have lived experience, and they may know they have lived experience, or they might not. And then there's people who, you know, are on the other extreme like me, who have all this clinical and professional background. But how is it that you help people increase their capability in this? So I think that's a really good question. And you know what? I don't know. This is like one of my favorite problems. So I'm glad you brought it up. And we should be working on that. You know. So thank you. Yes.
Hi, I'm Michelle Keller from UCLA and Cedars-Sinai Medical Center.
Yeah.
So in addition to being a health services researcher, I'm also a caregiver, actually, for my mother who suffers from chronic pain. And one of the things that really resonated with me was this idea of bringing in all these community resources, you know. So for her, for example, in addition to seeing, a variety of physicians, finding a pool where she could do exercise, finding an acupuncturist, and all of these things were things that we had to find together. They, weren't really, even if, for example, a physician recommended recommended acupuncture, they didn't have a referral source.
Right.
And so I'm wondering, within your own experience, if you ever had if you had that ideal experience of a physician recommending community resources, and if not, how could we build this into the industrial, complex?
Well, that's a good question. I used to work, I had a gig for a while, about 4 or 5 years. I worked for Boston Children's Hospital, and I led the Patient Family Experience Initiative there. And there were some really brilliant ED physicians who developed this app of community resources that were specific to Boston. And they ended up expanding that to St. Louis and Philadelphia. And, it's been a while since I've worked there, so I don't know what's happened to it. But it's work. And it's something that needs to be maintained. And then how do you vet it? So I feel like I've died and gone to heaven because my neurologist says, I don't know anything about acupuncture or chiropractic or meditation or whatever, but I'm into anything that works for my patients. So why don't you try stuff out and let me know how it goes, and then I can share that with other people. And to me, that was oh my God, I'm sticking with this guy. But you're right, it's work. I mean, and it takes resources.
But I like your idea of crowdsourcing it. It
Yeah.
could be very much, building resources based on what physician or patients are coming back to
Yeah.
with clinicians. So thank
Yeah,
you.
great, thank you.
Thank you, Danny.